Hey guys, Omni here today. I finally want to give you guys my thoughts on John Wick Chapter 4. I know I'm a little bit late to this. I originally saw the film Thursday night, the night before the official release, and I don't know what it was. Maybe I was in some kind of a funk or a bad mood or just tired, but I just left the movie feeling like I definitely did not enjoy this as much as I feel like I should have or normally would have, and definitely not as much as everybody else that was singing its praises that night on social media. So I was like, what is wrong with me? Maybe I should just see this again before I commit to standing behind my opinion as I was feeling coming out of the movie the first time. So I went and saw it again yesterday, and I gotta say, my enjoyment the second time around, after a fresh rest right in the morning, it was pretty much the first thing I did that day after, having breakfast or whatever, getting some energy going, and went down, sat down, and enjoyed it immensely more than the first time. I still have some of the same gripes, but they did not irk me nearly as much as the first time I watched the movie. Of course, the story picks up with John Wick after the events of the previous film, fully recovered, completely rejuvenated and healed up and ready to get back into the swing of his revenge quest. And we start to see in this movie, and it's one of the things I truly did love about it, is that it's a very contemplative film. This is a much more character-driven film than any of the previous entries. I dare say even more so than the first. What does John get out of this? What is the drive? What is the goal once he's done? Is there an end to this in sight? What is the plan when he achieves his goal? And then again, the other side of it that it really does focus on is the ramifications, the echoes, the waves caused by his actions. To those close to him, to everyone he comes in contact with, to old friends of his that come up in this as well mixed into the story, and how this revenge quest is not just about him. John's actions are larger and louder than himself, and it's really interesting how they play into that whole element and how these other characters that we are introduced to are all kind of echoes to that, or like connected in these kind of webs, all branching down to John. And it's a really interesting thing that they kind of fleshed out in this. I really like that element a lot about it. Those moments where we just kind of reflect on everything that's going on are some of my favorites in the film. We have a new character in this film played by Donnie Yen. His name is Kane. He's a former associate of John's, and their dynamic is some of the best in the franchise. I love every scene between those two. You can feel the history in every conversation. I loved every scene that Donnie Yen was in. He brought all that charisma and all that pizzazz to every scene. Every fight was just brilliantly handled with him particularly. And it just kind of further accentuates this elevated world that we live in this as well. This is also the most emotional, I would say, that I think the franchise gets, beyond obviously the inciting incident of the very first movie, within respect to its characters, the human players facilitating the story, their interactions, the relationships, and it's all beautifully encapsulated and presented in these performances that are done in these nice and subtle ways. Donnie Yen especially, I would love to call out for that, because he's got some really great moments throughout the film where there's some little character ticks, some little just these little choices that really sell this character's history and drive. While John is still our focal character in a lot of ways, we spend a lot more time with other characters and seeing the fallout of his actions on these other characters. We get to see how John Wick's quest is affecting and shaking the foundation of everything this world has built upon itself. Everything that the table stands upon is being shaken at its core by John's actions. We see the good and the bad of that. This time around, the table has appointed Bill Skarsgård to bring and rein in John Wick, finally, once and for all. He really eats up this role. Another really interesting character is Shamier Anderson's Tracker. He never really has an actual name. He never even goes by Tracker in the movie. That's just what he's listed as in the credits. He's a fascinating character. You can tell there's a lot behind these eyes, and there's a lot of history there. And that's one of the things that one of my minor qualms with the film is man, I would have loved to have known more about this guy. And maybe we'll get to learn more about him in some of the spinoffs up and coming. But I was really fascinated with his motivation and his kind of speciality. I would have really loved to have dived deeper into his character, but the scenes that he was in, again, he became part of this kind of trifecta throughout the film between him, Donnie, and Keanu as everything is kind of unfolding. It's a very interesting dynamic that these three have at the center of this story. And I feel like his was kind of left to the wayside. Maybe it was on the chopping block, because I did know that they struggled to cut this film down, and maybe some of that got trimmed out in the end, but I don't know, who's to say. But that character was really interesting. I felt like we were only just scratching the surface, and I would love to dig deeper into that. Hiroyuki Sanada plays Koji, who is a continental manager, much like Winston. However, he's in charge of the Osaka branch. He's also a former associate of John's. And it's interesting because through these perspectives, like I said, of Winston, of Koji, of Donnie, of Laurence Fishburne's, Bowery King, all these other players in the world that kind of operate these elements of this assassin underworld, we see how John's actions just continue to echo and domino into other people's territories, and how his effects are kind of creeping in to the greater world. He's got some good scene work between himself and a couple of other people. Again, I don't want to go into details. He's got some great scenes with a couple different people that are all really well done. His daughter, Akira, is played by Rina Sawayama. Of course, as always, we got Ian McShane as Winston, and the late Lance Riddick as Karen, who is not in a large portion of the film, but what he is in is very meaningful, and I think especially if his passing weighs heavy on you now, I think watching the film, it's probably going to hit you even harder. Clancy Brown makes a small appearance throughout the film as well as a harbinger, a kind of like judicator for the table, kind of managing the situation and being this mediator between the table and the marquee. And he's a pretty interesting character. We got Marco Zaror, who is one of the marquee's henchmen, who has some pretty interesting, he's kind of recurring goon throughout the film, and he's got some pretty great moments. But yeah, he other than that, he doesn't really add too much to the film, but when he's on screen, he puts it all on the line, man. And then, of course, we have Scott Adkins playing Killa Harkin. You know, with the Batman, we had Colin Farrell as the Penguin, and now in this, we got Scott Adkins doing something very similar, but very different. Pretty much the same roles, both running nightclubs, both kind of running this scuzzy kind of segment of the underworld, and both very much so two actors taking on a vastly different physical appearance than their normal one to kind of sell this role. He's a very interesting character, and it was definitely changed the tone for a few scenes, and it was kind of wild, man. It was kind of wild seeing him come to light in this way. It's not something I expected at all. Now, this film is, I think, easily the most beautiful in the franchise. The cinematography, the color palette, and the lighting in every scene alone is breathtaking. This film is just gorgeous. There are so many shots and sequences that just kind of keep every moment fresh, and while also just kind of reveling in the world around us as well. There's so many potential wallpaper moments throughout this film that you can catch where it's like, oh man, that would be a great backdrop. It's just a beautiful, beautiful movie, easily the best looking in the franchise. And this has the most action out of any of them. It is also the longest film, and they said that they struggled to get it to this runtime, and it's still the longest entry. And even at that point, I still think that this movie could have been trimmed down further, because while the action is plentiful and bountiful and full, there's so much of it, and every location is different, every setting and scenario is different, I still felt like they all kind of overstayed their welcome a little bit. I think every scene could have been trimmed down to maybe 3 to 5 minutes shorter, because I feel like at times, for me personally, the action started to interrupt the pace and the energy of the movie for me. And because of these longer drawn out action sequences, unlike the previous three, I will say, I started to notice a lot of flaws and errors in the choreography. I saw way more noticeably people waiting for Keanu Reeves to take his turn, people just kind of, doing filler movements in the background against nothing. I saw some people literally shooting away from the action. I saw one scene where, because they have these bulletproof suits and stuff, that one of the bulletproof ping effects went off of a dude's head, like his forehead. Bald dude, not wearing any armor or helmet, like it popped off his head. So there's like a couple of elements in here where I did feel like because they were going for these overly bombastic action sequences, because this was like this building crescendo of the story of this chapter, that we started to kind of lose sight of kind of keeping it as clean as some of the other ones. I think that's something you run the risk of when you start to go bigger and go harder. And along with that, too, we've seen John survive some crazy stuff, man, but they really push that to the limit in this one. There's a lot of times in this, with as elevated as this world has been, as forgiving as I'm sure we have been because of the fantastical nature of this, there's a lot of times throughout this movie where I'm just like, no way. Like, it breaches that point for me a couple of times where like, nope. But you just gotta roll with it. There's a couple of sequences that gets a little kind of repetitive to the point it becomes borderline cartoony. And there's some sequences that were extremely inventive, though, to the contrary. Like, there is a segment that kind of emulates those top-down video games, like those top-down shooters, where you grab like a power-up and your gun will do like some crazy stuff or whatever. We kind of like are doing like a tracking through like this building. And it was really, really well done. But much like everything else, I felt like even that went on a little too long. Like every moment I felt like lingered just a tad longer than it needed to. And that's something that even on the second watch, I still felt, even though it didn't hamper my overall enjoyment nearly as much as it did the first time around. Overall, the resolution to the film, while I found it rewarding in a lot of ways, I found it kind of disappointing in others. Again, the world building's phenomenal. We learn and see more aspects of this world and how it operates than we've seen in other films. It's always building upon the previous entry and expanding. And I'm very curious to see where they go from here. I did read that both Keanu and Chad Stahelski are going to be taking a break from the John Wick series for now. Of course, we already know that John will be appearing in the Ballerina spinoff film with Ana de Armas. So we got that to look forward to. And then there's the prequel spinoff series, The Continental, which is coming as well. And who knows what else they're going to work on. But at least for right now, Chad is taking a step back and working on some other stuff. We got a trailer for another film that they're working on too, which looks really wild, that I really can't wait to check out. But overall, I think this was a really solid entry. I don't like it more than one. On the character beats, the character expansions, the world building, and the visuals alone, I think I'm going to give the number 2 spot to John Wick Chapter 4, and then 2 and then 3 would be my ranking for the franchise right now. But guys, I'd love to know your thoughts. Sound off the comments. Let me know your thoughts down below. We'll carry on the conversation after the video. Feel free to join us in our Discord. We can talk about it there as well. Links to that and all my socials down below. Follow me in each and every one of those. And before we go, I want to shout out our channel legends, Manny Sherritt, Ryan Karen, Jason Coleman, Philly Vane, Yori Korsgaard, Margaret Grace, Melita, Robert Anguiano, Raven McGann, Jeffrey Hale, M. Sephiroth, Jake Cantrell, Josh Lee, and Aaron Myers. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. That's it for this video, guys, and I'll see you all in the next one. Take care, everybody.